I got some bad news for you folks on a day when we have some very good news. You know those pods you put in your dishwasher? They're covered in plastic. So where does it go? Where does that plastic go? I'll tell you what happens. The hot water in your dishwasher sort of melts it down. Then it ends up on your plate. Then it ends up in your belly. Well, actually, there was a study that showed that I think it was mice have it in their testicles or something. Anyways, yep, not good. Point is, most plastic doesn't end up inside you, but that's still not a good thing. It ends up in the ocean. Blueland is on a mission to eliminate single-use plastic by reinventing cleaning essentials to be better for you and the planet. Has the same powerful clean you're used to, except for without all of the plastic. Blueland uses no single-use plastic in any component. Bottles, their bottles are reusable. Tablets don't come wrapped in plastic, and their wrappers that the shipping comes in, all recyclable paper. Their tablet packaging is fully compostable. Blueland products are effective and affordable. Their dishwasher tablets are proven to perform on baked on, burnt on stains, no rinse aid needed. I love these things. I have basically gotten rid of almost all of the plastic containers, and I don't buy anymore. And I'd save a lot of space. You can even get more savings by buying refills in bulk or setting up a subscription. Their subscriptions are customizable, convenient, so you never run out of your most used products. Blueland trusted in over 1 million homes, including mine. I just dropped a new tablet into my, what do you call it? Everything, the all-purpose cleaner. They've got 3 major cleaners, the all-purpose, the window, and the bathroom. And the plastic bottles, which you don't ever get rid of, you reuse them. They're all shaded a different color, which makes it easy for me to figure out which is which. Blueland has a special offer for our listeners right now. You get 15% off your first order by going to blueland.com/majority. You don't want to miss this. Blueland.com/majority, 15% off. That's blueland.com/majority to get 15% off. Link in the podcast and YouTube description. And now for today's very fun show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, we know who the VP pick is. Harris picks Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, as the vice presidential nominee. We will talk a lot about this over the next couple of days. Also on the program today, James North on the Venezuelan election, and particularly, what should the U.S. do about it? Meanwhile, Kamala Harris, the official nominee, and Trump is the official new old guy. It's primary day in Kansas, Michigan, and Washington, and Missouri's 1st district. Go vote for Cory Bush if you live there.
Yep.
D.C. Circuit Court drops a big one, rules Google a monopoly in violation of the Sherman Act. This is a big deal. Meanwhile, North Carolina is the latest state to investigate Elon Musk's fake voter registration scheme. I hope he has to lawyer up. I bet you he's got a lot of different arm's length towards that scheme. Speaking of lawyering up, Clarence Thomas failed to report yet another Harlan Crow luxury vacation that he took. Israeli human rights group documents more torture in Israeli so-called prison camps. Literally says they should be called torture camps. And freaks in Nassau County, New York, outlaw masks. This as COVID infections grow in New York State and 34 other states. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Emma Vigeland off today, although I it's not inconceivable that she won't call it.
Yeah, she's listening.
She's attempting to step away from politics and not. Did you ever see that movie Naked Gun? Was it or no? It's Airplane, where the pilot says or somebody says on there like bad day to stop huffing glue. Tough day for Emma to step away from politics.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of that Nassau County mask ban, a little bit of trivia. The first week I was living in New York, the only time I've ever been in Nassau County, you know who it was to see? Russell Brand.
Oh boy. So
it fits.
There you go. And it's like a salmon swimming back to their birth. We'll talk a little bit about that Nassau County stuff, but obviously the big news today, and tomorrow we should say we're going to be talking more about the Google ruling and Tim Walz with American Prospects David Dayen. But let's talk a little bit about Tim Walz. He is the governor of Minnesota. He is in his second term. He will be term limited out in 2026. And he will be replaced. I don't have her name, but by
Peggy Flanagan is the
Peggy Flanagan,
lieutenant governor,
who is the lieutenant governor. We'll have more on her in the coming days. But this is a big deal. Now, look, I always try and sort of temper my wet blanket, tendencies in situations like this. And so let me just get this out of the way. Tim Walz is not perfect. There is no politician that is perfect. Within the context of the various picks that were available, or I should say that were in contention, I think Tim Walz was the best. Again, he's not perfect, but no politician is. And he's done a lot of great things in Minnesota, and a couple of things that aren't great, but a lot more great things. And he has done so with a 1-seat majority in the Senate. There's a lot of different ways in which to analyze this pick, both in terms of does he help electorally and how? Also, what does he say about Kamala Harris's agenda? What does he say about Kamala Harris's perspective on what she's going to face if she does win? What does his pick, as opposed to other picks that were possible, say about the power that progressives have now within the Democratic coalition? And let's just start with some of the basics about Walz. Like I say, elected to governor in 2018, started serving in 2019. Prior to that, he was a congressman in a substantially red district. I think that district now just went for Trump in 2020 by 15 points. He was there for 12 years. When he ran in 2006, he appeared on the Majority Report. At that time when we were on Air America,
Wow, I didn't know this.
we had a program that we were doing with Marcus Malitzis of the Daily Kos called The Fighting Dems. Remember, there was this was an election in 2006 that we wanted to make about being against the Iraq War. Now, I think that was a big part of it in terms of Congress. A bigger part was maybe the fact that, it turned out that multiple members of the Republican leadership were covering up a congressman who was preying on some congressional interns. But be that as it may, he came on, he was a vet. And maybe he may have been active duty or at least a reservist at that time, if I remember correctly now. He was a National Guardsman. He ended up being the highest ranking active duty, because of his reservist, military person to serve in Congress. He sat on the Veterans Affairs Committee. He sat on the Ag Committee in Congress. He also got a waiver so that he could sit on the Armed Services Committee. He voted against the Iraq War in 2007. Yeah, I should say he voted to withdraw in 2007. He also, though, voted for the 2007 Iraq War supplemental monies for the military there. He entered politics. This is what was interesting. He was a football coach and a teacher. He taught in China at one point. He taught for high school. When he got back or I guess became a reservist and was no longer active duty, after 9/11, he served in Italy and apparently helped coordinate things happening in Afghanistan. He took his students to a Bush rally as a civics lesson. One of the kids apparently had a Kerry sticker on their person or on something they were carrying. And so they were not allowed to go into the rally. This was a practice at that time by the Bush people. And this is presumably in 2004 against Kerry. And that made him decide, like, I need to run for Congress. Another story I have read is that local Democrats, and we should say in Minnesota, it's not the Democratic Party, it's the Democrat Farmer Labor Party, DFL. They found Walz and they were very excited about him to run because he was a teacher, very civic minded, had this military background, could speak against the Iraq War. Rahm Emanuel, who was at that time head of the DCCC, did not want him as the candidate because he couldn't self-fund. That was Rahm Emanuel's, among other things, that was one of his pet projects, getting people to pay, having only wealthy people. Let's go through, once he was elected governor in 2020, or I should say in the wake of the 2020 election. Was it in 2020 or 2021 when the Minnesota got the state house flipped? I think it was in 22. With a 1-seat majority in the Minnesota Senate, they passed paid and family sick leave. Not a perfect paid and family sick leave. We'll get into the details of that, but better than the one the rest of us have. Again, that was it. Yeah, that was after 2022 midterms. They passed abortion protections. They passed a child tax credit, which severely cut down on poverty in that state. In terms of labor, they nixed non-compete clauses. They allowed for sectoral bargaining amongst nurses. They allowed teachers to negotiate class size. They banned captive meetings where management would use to union bust. They passed protections for meat packers and construction workers. They passed free breakfast and lunch in Minnesota schools. They protected gender-affirming care and banned conversion therapy. They legalized pot. They did automatic voter registration. They restored voting rights to well over 100,000 felons. They increased education funding and expanded pre-K. They passed undocumented immigrants to getting licenses. They funded affordable housing. They banned junk fees. There were a couple of negatives. They weakened some of the pay standards in Uber and Lyft after the minimum wage was passed. And that was on Walz. They gave the Mayo Clinic a little bit of a waiver on some nursing standards. But net, that would be a big achievement if we could do that nationally. On foreign policy, basically replacement level Democrat. Spoke at APAC in 2010. Has been for a two-state solution. He didn't necessarily agree with uncommitted, but praised their ability to vote and praised it as opposed to going after people who were protesting it. He supported the 2015 nuke deal while in Congress. On balance,
That's
a pretty
big test.
progressive pick.
Yeah.
And it will, and we'll talk more about this in the days to come. I'm sure Emma is chomping at the bit to talk about this, but Emma's talked about what we know about Kamala Harris's agenda going forward. And if this pick is any indication, she is clearly not running away from the ideas that were in Build Back Better, because what he managed to pass in Minnesota was a Build Back Better type of bill. And, in some instances, the numbers were compatible, but broadly speaking, this indicates a couple of things. She's not going to run away from that. Will she be able to achieve it? Who knows? She also expects that if she's in a position of winning, she is not going to have a huge majority. She also savvy enough to know, having a 12-year veteran from Congress to go in there, a guy who was apparently very popular, to get that waiver and sit on both those military committees, big deal. He was presumably supported by Nancy Pelosi as well as Bernie Sanders. So this is a pick that also contemplates maybe a role for him in the governing going forward. Sending someone, this is what Biden supposedly did for Obama. Now, when Biden went to the Senate, he usually gave away the store. Walz does not seem like someone who is prepared to do that in the same way. This is the part that I really like about Walz. All these policies are there. It's clear that he was willing to put himself on the line politically in a state where there was a one vote margin, a one vote majority. That means he is not timid in those type of situations. And you can see his partisanship, which is an important thing that we have not had in the Democratic Party. The idea that we have good ideas. Maybe those ideas are not as good as I would want them or you would want them, but his ideas are pretty good, particularly for Democrats. But we don't need to be afraid of those ideas. We don't need to compromise on those principles, because when we articulate those principles and the Republicans say they're against them, they look like lunatics. Here is Walz. This is from a couple of weeks ago. I think we probably played this at the time. I don't know if we did, with Jake Tapper. This was on, well, I guess it was just about a week ago. And this is how Walz is going to respond when he gets attacked. Now, remember, Kamala Harris, these guys had basically a public job interviews, right? Where they're going out and showing, this is what I'll be like. If Harris doesn't want this, she wouldn't have picked him. Play this clip.
But you've legalized recreational marijuana, you passed universal background checks on guns, you expanded LGBTQ protections, you implemented tuition-free college for low-income Minnesotans. There's free breakfast and lunch for school kids. Do you think your record is an asset to the ticket, or would it risk fueling Trump's attacks as you being a big government liberal?
What a monster. Kids are eating and having full bellies so they can go learn, and women are making their own healthcare decisions. And we're a top 5 business state, and we also rank in the top 3 of happiness. Look, they're going to label whatever they're going to label. He's going to roll it out, mispronounce names, to try and make the case. The fact of the matter is, where you see the policies that Vice President Harris was a part of making, Democratic governors across the country executed those policies, and quality of life is higher, the economies are better, all of those things. Educational attainment is better. So yeah, my kids are going to eat here, and you're going to have a chance to go to college, and you're going to have an opportunity to live where we're working on reducing carbon emissions. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have personal incomes that are higher, and you're going to have health insurance. So if that's where they want to label me, I'm more than happy to take the label.
I mean, that is 10 for 10 as a political matter. 10 for 10. I forgot to mention the college tuition and the carbon emission standards for 2030. It doesn't get much better than that in terms of an elected politician in this country. That is, that's largely the type of, at least, response that we would hear from someone like Bernie Sanders, or from, non 80-year-old Democratic politicians who entered politics in the early 90s or in the 80s, or in the wake of the McGovern loss in the early 70s, and always tried to find a clever way of seeming like they weren't too strident, seeming like they didn't embrace these policies, which are unequivocally good policies. And that's the way you talk about these things. You don't try and split the difference on abortion. You don't try and split the difference on LGBTQ rights. You don't do it. You challenge the Republicans, these weirdos, to try and make their case that their vision for America is better, and they can't do it. They simply can't do it. When they open their mouths, and we've seen it over the past couple of weeks, when they open their mouths to try and justify their policy positions, they just sound weirder to normal people. All right, we got more to play with Tim Walz. Let me just do a couple of words from our sponsors. It's summertime. You don't want to cook. It's too hot. Well, if you're in an apartment like mine and you're standing in front of that stove, you start sweating immediately. Factor has no prep, no mess meals. They deliver right to your door. You can meet your wellness goals in time for summer, thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart or Protein Plus or Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved. They are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you're always going to have time to enjoy a nutritious, great tasting meals. And if you're like me, put one on the table for your kids and not feel like you're not feeding them well, and also not breaking the bank, and also not sweating over into the actual meal that you're making because it's so hot in your apartment this summer. It really has changed my entire outlook on microwaves. I was always a microwave skeptic, and now I understand Want to thank Factor for supporting the Majority Report? What are you waiting for? You can get started today. Have a feel-good week of meals ready to go. Head to factormeals.com/majority50, majority50, and use the code majority50. That's the number 50, majority50, to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. They got 35 different meals. They got 60 different add-ons to choose from each week, like dessert and breakfast and snacks. You can crush your wellness goals if you want. They've got, like I say, the keto and the protein plus and the calorie ones, and they just got chef choices. They have restaurant quality meals. Saul's super into chicken, but he now likes, to my complete surprise, like a cilantro chicken he'll eat. We've gotten the shredded chicken taco bowl, which is delicious. Chicken thighs with a cauliflower mash. Fantastic. Healthy. And I'm a fish guy, but if you cook fish in my apartment, it smells for about 6 weeks. Now I get the pesto salmon, put it in the microwave, and I can enjoy my fish without the entire apartment seem like, the docks. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, no prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat a well-balanced meal. They've got, something like 40 different stuff on the menu each week. Head to factormeals.com/majority50. Use the code majority50. Get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. Code majority50 at factormeals.com/majority50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Also, another product I've used this weekend. I went to a party this weekend, actually 2 nights of parties. A friend of mine turned 50, traveled down to the Cape, and brought my Zbiotics with me. When we were doing the RNC, drank the Zbiotics before. Why? Because after a night with drinks, I do not bounce back the way I used to. Zbiotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic drink. It's the first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to help you feel better the morning after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that makes you feel not so good the next day. Zbiotics produces an enzyme. It breaks this byproduct down. All you got to do, you drink Zbiotics. It's your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. It is why I was able to come in and do the show after the RNC, and it will be that case with the DNC. And it was also this weekend. I want to have a couple of drinks. I don't want to have to sleep until noon and feel sick. And Zbiotics makes it possible. Go to zbiotics.com/majority. Get 15% off your first order when you use the code majority at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. Zbiotics, backed with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they will refund your money. No questions asked. Remember, head to zbiotics.com/majority. Use the code majority at checkout, 15% off. Thank you, Zbiotics, for sponsoring this episode. I want to play a clip of Tim Walz on the White Dudes for Harris Zoom. I hadn't seen it in real time. And this is, this is about as good as it gets in terms of rhetoric when it comes to Democratic politicians. Here is Tim Walz. Let's start more or less from the beginning. Maybe go a minute into it. But he's talking, he's talking about the importance of this election. It's really at the end, which I really love. But check this out.
Case, and for one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborly.
Wait, what's that? What happened there? I thought we were going to start at the.
Oh, sorry. 1 second.
Trying to get pregnant needed fertility treatments, things like IVF, things that they would ban. And so once again, I keep talking about this idea. You're right. These guys are the anti-freedoms. I grew up in a small town, 400 people, 24 kids in the class, 12 cousins. And I hear J.D. Vance trying to talk about what a small town is. There's one golden rule in a small town. Those of you who are from a small town, mind your own damn business. We don't need it. I don't know who's asking for this crazy stuff that they're pushing. Who's asking to ban birth control? Who's asking to raise the price of insulin? I'm a Legion Club member, and none of the dudes there are asking to cut veterans benefits like Project 2025 does. So look, that's not where
Pause it for 1
folks are
second.
at.
There's a couple of things I just want to say here. One, he grew up apparently in Nebraska. I don't know where in Nebraska he grew up, but I wonder how much that's going to help in terms of that one electoral vote in Nebraska that the Democrats really want and need. It won't hurt. Let's put it that way.
No.
There's, to be able to send him in there. He also apparently will speak quite a bit about IVF treatment because he and his wife apparently needed that treatment for their child. I guess they tried for about 8 years and couldn't do it. I mean, he's going to speak to this stuff and continue.
2025 does. So look, that's not where folks are at. I represented a rural district. Donald Trump won it by 15 points in 2016 when I won. Those are folks that want a fair shot. We need to point out to this. The reason rural America hurts is because robber barons like these guys have come in there. These are the guys that take money out of our public schools for private schools to give vouchers to people who are already going to private school. They undermine the basic social safety net that makes this country great. So when I hear you on here, I hear Josh talking about hope. That is exactly right. That's what we need. And then coupled with that, because my wife reminds me of this, she said, hope is the most powerful word in the universe, but it's not a damn plan. We need a plan to win. And that's what you guys are doing. That's what smashing that button does. That's what's calling. And again, this is preaching to the choir, but the choir needs to sing. The choir needs to sing. This is our moment. This is not just transformational for one election. This is transformational for several generations. But here's the thing that I take a responsibility for. We're not in this alone. The rest of the world needs us to be here. These guys throwing our NATO allies under the bus, the idea that they don't care what happens in the rest of the world, not addressing climate change that's going to impact communities that are less fortunate than anyone else. Those are the things it has to do. We have communities that are going to pay the price because we don't address it. Here's the great news. How often in 100 days do you get to change the trajectory of the world? How often in 100 days do you get to do something that's going to impact generations to come? And how often in the world do you make that bastard wake up afterwards and know that a black woman kicked his ass and sent him on the road? And you know that's something that guy's going to have to live with for the rest of his life. So I got to tell all of you, please, please, do what you can. Please talk. Look, I got Florida Man as a brother. We all got him in our families. But these are our neighbors and our relatives. And at heart, they're good people. They're not mean-spirited. They're not small. They're not petty like they hear on stage. They're angry. They're confused. They're frustrated. They feel like they got left behind sometimes. But we can get out there, reach out, make the case. And for one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Just do the damn work. So I got to tell you, when I see this, it lifts me up. I'm inspired. I see it. Again, anti-Tommy Tuberville, this is the first day of football. We're all in this. We're all undefeated. We got an opportunity on this. I want to be standing in that day in November when we're playing for the big one, and I'll take us. And again, keep hammering on these guys. This idea of calling them out for who they are, shrink them. Is he a danger to society? Yes. Is he a danger to women's health? Yes. Is he a danger to world peace? Yes. But don't give him more credit than he needs. He's just a strange, weird dude, as we've been saying. Pick that in the pace. Pick up the work. Do the work. Donate. Call. Talk to your neighbors. Let's win this thing. No regrets at the end of this. Thanks, folks.
I mean, he talks like a normal person. I mean, like a football coach, maybe not too harsh. But I love the idea that he's out there saying one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. I like the idea that he can sell a set of policies not with a political identification, but rather with one of like, this is just being a good person.
Yeah. And I mean, I have your wet blanket impulses too, but since Emma's not here to be positive, I'll just be positive for a second. You know, there's that junior partner in a coalition sort of phrase that I think there's a lot of cynicism on a national level for it, I think rightly. But in the Minnesota level, you had Senator Omar Fateh, who led that those rideshare bills, which actually like eventually were able to pass not in the level that Walz denied, but also Robin Wansley. A lot of these things that were passed in Minnesota with that knife edge were done with socialists and DSA-backed Democrats in the coalition. So literally, they were a junior partner in the coalition, and the partner in the coalition that did the things that Walz is now touting as he becomes the VP pick. So yeah, I think it is. And I also like the 2 points he makes about don't catastrophize because it empowers them, and two, like, to hear a Democrat say we're not just going to raise our nose at people like the Florida man in our families, I think that's really important for Democrats in a lot of these communities they've been losing.
Well, the thing I like what he said there, he's saying, I mean, it is, you know, we're a couple of weeks away from Michael's birthday, but it was very much in consistent with, you know, Michael's perspective on being, you know, brutal to systems. Yeah. But kinder to people. And he said, you know, reach out to these people. They're not bad people. They're confused. They're this and that. But he also said, but do not back off your progressive values.
Yep.
That's the point. There is a difference between reaching out to people and selling them on progressive values, treating them with respect, selling them progressive values, then rather than backing off your progressive values as some way of reaching out. Mm-hmm. That is the way to do it, is to treat people with respect. Most people, there's some people I feel like I don't respect, but for the most part, but essentially converting them, not converting yourself so that you can sit in proximity to them. That's not going to work.
Right.
Frankly, I don't think people ultimately respect that either.
No, it's a much better posture to take, though, I think.
No, I'm saying I don't think they respect it when you back off your own values and ideals.
Definitely not.
To an attempt to cozy up with them. I just think people find that, I don't know.
Ask UK Labor how cozying up to anti-immigrant stuff plays out.
All right, we're going to talk more about Tim Walz later in the program, and tomorrow we're going to have David Dayen on. We'll talk to him about it as well, in addition to the Google thing. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, oh wait, do we even need to take a break?
Yeah, let's take a quick break.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to talk to James North. He's a reporter covering the Global South and an editor-at-large at MondoWeiss, to talk about what's going on in Venezuela. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out today. Joining me now, James North, reporter covering the Global South, editor-at-large at MondoWeiss. James, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
So let's, I mean, a broad stroke, on this. Let's just remind people of the recent history in terms of Venezuela, because that you had a piece in The Nation assessing what happened during the election to some extent, but also prescriptive for the United States based upon what we've done in the past, and a conversation. I would imagine I'm also just in general you're reporting, but you were speaking to James Weisbrot. So give us that sort of like a quick history of where we are with Venezuela.
Well, thank you very much. It's a complicated story, and I was really trying to do two things in this article in The Nation. I was expressing skepticism about the declared results of the election last week, but far more importantly, in my view, is the fact that no matter what happened in that election, whether the Maduro government is stealing it or not, I think they are, but that's secondary to my larger point, which is that U.S. economic warfare, which really increased enormously under the Trump administration, has created the greatest humanitarian crisis in Latin American history, certainly for the last 150, 200 years, which in turn has created the greatest refugee flow, again, in Latin American history. 1 out of every 4 Venezuelans has left the country. Some of them are arriving here. Most of them are still elsewhere in Latin America, but they may continue to head in our direction. And the U.S. economic warfare was declared by Trump. It was really a surprise to the experts in the U.S. State Department. The view is that Trump and Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, were pandering to the right-wing elements in the Latino community there. And so what they basically did, I just want to read what the consequences of this were. Let me just give you a few statistics here.
Please.
Mark Weisbrot he pointed out that since Trump declared this, the economic warfare basically closed Venezuela off from international finance. It blocked its exports of oil. It interfered with its imports because you need finance to finance imports. And as a result, Venezuela was already in an economic crisis. But I call it economic warfare rather than sanctions. What it did was Venezuela's economy collapsed by 38% in the first few years following Trump's sanctions, which is a greater collapse than happened in our country in the U.S. in the Great Depression in the early 1930s. Imports dropped 91%, food imports by 78%. Malnourishment, which had been 3% a decade ago, rose to 27%. Infant mortality rose, and 82% of the population ended up in poverty. So my point is, whatever the intention behind these sanctions, all they've done is create misery and death for large numbers of Venezuelans and force others into exile. So no matter what happened in the election, and I do have an opinion about what happened, the U.S. should stop that, end the economic warfare, and then we can see what the next steps should be. But it really is a dramatic. In other words, let me just summarize by saying focusing on the election is obvious and important, and should be done. But the larger problem here is, again, the greatest humanitarian catastrophe in Latin America's history, certainly in the last 150 or 200 years.
I mean, I don't want to overgeneralize, although there is a tendency within the sort of like, I guess, the conventional wisdom of both U.S. foreign policy, and I think just like an average American, when we see something that we think is, unjust or ostensibly unjust, or, there's some type of civil war, our immediate reaction is we should get involved. But there are instances, Syria for one comes to mind for me, where we just can't do anything. We can't do anything. We can't do anything that is in any way helpful for the people that ostensibly we're going to help. Now, I also want to be, I'm not naive. There's a lot of people who have an interest in imposing these type of sanctions or to getting involved in these foreign conflicts who have a completely different agenda that has nothing to do with the people who live there as much as the resources that they want access to.
Correct.
They want cheaper oil. They want more expensive oil. They want to extract certain things They want U.S. businesses to have whatever those agendas are. I'm talking about the one, I guess, that is sold ultimately to the American public, which is what we've seen time and time again in the context of Venezuela.
Oh, absolutely right. And U.S. hostility to the Chavez government and now the Maduro government dates back to when Chavez was first elected in the late 1990s. I spent some time down there in the early years of his reign, and there was certainly hostility. But what I want to emphasize here is that what the Trump administration did was an enormous escalation of the existing hostility and U.S. Criticism of what was going on there. It was under the Obama administration there was nothing equivalent. And what has happened is that although the Venezuelan economy was already in trouble in 2017, due partly to its own mismanagement and application, poor economic policies, but what's happened since then is that it's fallen off a cliff. And my dispute or questioning of the journalists who were there in person over the past week was, yes, they concentrated on what was actually happening in the streets, the allegations, in my view, true, of fraud on the part of the government, of stealing the election, all true. But what they should have done is maybe stay a little longer and gone into some of these poorer neighborhoods and done some reporting on the actual malnutrition that exists there, on how many people have left individual families. Apparently, in some of the demonstrations after the election results were announced, one of the things they said was, my father left, my grandmother left, my sister left, no one's left here. I mean, imagine that. A quarter of the country's people have left. Now, I have done a lot of work over the years in Central America. I reported during the U.S. war, supported wars there in the 1980s. My first report was actually from Nicaragua in 1975 when the Sandinistas were just getting started. Okay, so it is certainly true that refugees, migrants, whatever term you want to use, have left, places like Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador in large numbers. But it's nothing like what we're seeing from Venezuela. I mean, in New York, where I live, I gather the latest figures are that 20,000 Venezuelans have shown up here in the last year or two. We never had refugees. We in the U.S., had very few refugees from Venezuela before. There were a few in South Florida, but that was about it. And so here's this disaster that's happening that's directly attributable in large measure to U.S. policy. And all the U.S. would have to do is end this economic warfare, end the sanctions. I gather the state, certainly it doesn't have to pass Congress. The State Department, the president could just do that. And I hope they would, because not only is it bad for Venezuelans in Venezuela, but if you're talking about the root causes being behind the massive wave of migrants heading north, this is one that is clear, obvious, recent, and can be remedied like with a stroke of a pen, frankly.
This is like first order, as opposed to, like, let's say Honduras, maybe, which is a legacy of U.S. involvement, which ultimately, undercut the civil society and the institutions that needed to be built and would have developed over time. This is first order, as opposed to sort of like, the delayed kidney punch, I guess.
Absolutely.
Let's just talk.
Right.
Okay. Let's because I want to actually give an assessment too of what Maduro is doing, just for fairness, because it is, but it's also like to be able to sit with this idea of, like, Maduro may be doing some very bad things, might have done but that we're not in a position to be a positive influence. I want to talk about, but what has Biden done in terms of the Trump regime of economic warfare? I actually, there's been a good series in the Washington Post over the past couple of weeks about this.
Yes.
But has Biden rolled back any of it from the Trump regime? To what extent has he, and what is still extant?
That's an excellent question. My main source for the economic facts in my article basically said that yes, the Biden administration has somewhat relaxed the sanctions, but that they're still crippling. The idea was that if you relax them somewhat, the government would carry out fair elections, then you would relax them some more. I question the morality of that, but I understand where they were coming from. But my point is that if Maduro gets away with this, you should still relax the sanctions because it's an economic, it's basically a disaster, helping to create or worsen a disaster. On top of which, one of my sources in the past has been Chuo Torrealba, who is a leader of the internal opposition. And the point that he has made is that, actually, let me just grab his quote right here from you so I can get it straight. His point is basically that, here we go. Okay. The Trump administration, here's what he told me a couple of years ago. The Trump administration believed that if you make people suffer, if you impose the politics of pain, that you will promote a general insurrection. That has not happened. Hungry people do not revolt. So in other words, the idea which would be that these sanctions would cause the Venezuelans to rise up en masse and overthrow the government failed. It failed. It almost always fails if you look at historical. I'm sure you could come up with a number of examples yourself.
Well, I mean, Cuba.
But the point is, exactly, precisely, it has failed here. So,
and not only that, I would argue, not only does it inhibit the type of reaction from the people that supposedly it's supposed to promote, it allows the leadership of the country to create a villain outside of the country's borders and blame everything internally on that outside. And I mean, look, Bush did it with the war on terror. Castro did it with the United States. It empowers these people time and time again. What really we're watching is really just a fight for people who want to prevent the nationalization of a country's resources. And they don't care about what happens to the people if they can sort of maintain their iron grip on that. Now, with that said, you make the point that in terms of the election, the Maduro government made no effort to get the vote of a quarter of the country's population who have left the country in the wake of these sanctions. Yesterday, I guess it was yesterday, the Maduro government basically announced a criminal investigation against the opposition presidential candidate Gonzalez. And his party's leader Machado. They have arrested 2,000 opponents who have been rallying at the very least, and they're refusing to show precinct level vote counts.
Correct.
Let's and there's other I guess like Venezuelan based human rights organizations that are issuing reports saying that there's just a huge uptick in sort of like random arrests and whatnot. Give me your sense of Lula and Boric, president of Brazil and Chile respectively. They both initially sort of came out in support of Maduro, but seem to be now taking a half step back.
Well, yeah, no, what you point out is quite accurate about the actual fraud and the repression. Another significant fact is the Carter Center, which is a respected human rights group, in the past has announced that Venezuela's elections were among the freest in the world. They had electronic vote tabulating, whatever, and that was true. That was true. That Chavez won all of his elections basically freely and fairly. I mean, there may have been some little chicanery on the sides here and there, but he was definitely a popular leader. All you had to do was be there during the time he was in, especially the earlier years. But at any rate, what happened was that for this election, the Venezuelan government did not allow many human rights groups in, but they welcomed the Carter Center because they figured that the Carter Center was going to endorse what they were doing because it had in the past. And when the Carter Center announced that the elections were not free and fair, now the government has remained silent and is busy rounding up and locking up people. Behind the scenes, I think, although I have no inside information, but I think that there's certain maneuvering going on among the Latin American leaders of various types. Possibly there's negotiations behind the scenes with the Venezuelan military and whatever. And there may be some kind of transition, although, again, I have no firsthand information about this. But what I do approve of and like is that instead of the U.S. Butting its nose in here after having helped to create the problem, that, local leaders of, some are more conservative, some are less conservative, are starting to speak out because it is a Latin American problem. The refugee, Ecuador has a lot of refugees from Venezuela. Colombia has millions. And as you pointed out, the government made no effort, the Maduro government made no effort to allow these people to vote, even though they were in exile. Sometimes that's possible. Certain countries you can, certain citizens can vote in the US if they're actually citizens of Ecuador or Mexico or what have you. So that further cut the, improve the chances of the government, because if you've been forced to leave the country because you don't have enough to eat, you're unlikely to vote for the government that's in power at the time.
You're unlikely supportive, right?
Exactly. Now, my beef with the U.S. State Department at the moment is that they came out, they announced, they criticized the election, and I think they said they were recognizing the guy who probably did, in fact, win. I wish they would just shut up. They've talked. They've stuck their nose in too often and with too many negative consequences. I understand they feel compelled that they have to say something, but why don't they just sit back, let let people within Venezuela and the local presidents from other, as you said, Lula, Boric in Chile, next door in Colombia, let them try and come with some kind of an arrangement here, which will hopefully be peaceful. Because if it's not, and if the sanctions continue, instead of losing a quarter of its population, Venezuela could lose half of its population. And a lot of them are going to show up on the Rio Grande in the United States eventually.
I think it's also, I don't anticipate this happening, but it would be a great opportunity for the leadership of this country to explain the dynamic, which drives immigration so often, is a function of people being, it's not the pull of the United States as much as the push of people not being able to live in their country, feed their kids, live safely, et cetera, et cetera. James North, really appreciate your time today. We'll put a link to your piece in the Nation magazine.
Yes, thank you very much.
And thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks. We're going to take a break, and you can join us in the Fun Hub. We're going to take phone calls. People are excited about the Tim Walz thing. And this situation in Venezuela is a perfect example of how the United States has, in many ways, effed up much of this hemisphere. Whatever the intentions were, I happen to think that they were a little more, they're on the malignant side in just about every case. The words Banana Republic did not come from the store. They came from the United Fruit Company wanting to prevent Honduras from having any type of control over their natural resources, essentially. And that's when, I think that's the first instance, right, Matt? Is that the first instance of our interference? I would say, sort of like real material. What's that?
I wouldn't want to be too definitive about that. I feel like there was, I'm not sure.
That's the one, that's the 101 class. Let's put it that way, on our interference in the way that these governments function. And I can come up with 100 different metaphors of what happens when you mess with something in its nascent stages. Far more problematic. If you don't believe me, plant a tree. It's hard to mess with a a 50-year-old oak, but a year-old oak, it's easy to break it in half. And ends up growing up in a warped way. We're going to talk more about Tim Walz. Is it going to suck for Minnesota to lose their governor? Asked blind militant imperialism. We may actually see the first Native American governor, I think, in the country. Is that right?
I think actually it would maybe be second because if I'm not mistaken, Kevin Stitt, the governor of Oklahoma, is part Native American. But maybe first
female
and
Native.
Is Stitt like involved with a tribe, or is that through blood? Because that would be a distinction too, I think, based on like tribe. Usually, you have to have some sort of relationship to a tribal affiliation, not just say my great grandmother was.
He's a member of the Cherokee Nation.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. I said Honduras. It's Guatemala is where the United Fruit Company was.
Right.
Some people are. The Mexican American War, the Spanish American way, Veracruz membership, but Guatemalan interference is like sort of like the more modern model, I guess.
Yeah, Nicaragua was like back in like the 19th century with like the original gerrymanders. Was it those guys or Oh no, not the gerrymanders. What is it when you block something in the Senate? Filibusters. The original filibusters. That was where that word was originally from.
We're going to talk more about Walz. I love the reaction from all the right people. I mean, in many respects, like I am very pleasantly surprised that Walz was picked.
Shocked. Although Pelosi coming out was like, okay, this is actually going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah. But honestly, Shapiro.
Ari Fleischer's not happy.
Oh, I'm sorry. George Bush's former spokesperson. Sorry that the Democrats didn't do what you wanted. Honestly, I thought it would be Bashir. It seemed to me to be the safest sort of pick that was out there. Shapiro would have been just an unmitigated, stupid pick. I'm sorry. There was just, the guy's been governing for 2 years. Regardless of what you think he's done, the real question came down to, would he win Pennsylvania? Would the difference between him and somebody else win Pennsylvania versus with the cost associated with putting him on the ticket? Rightly or wrongly, let's just step aside for a moment because no one here can control this. And so I'm not even going to put a value judgment on it. I wouldn't feel bad about it, but about it happening. But the reality is that if Shapiro was on the ticket, there would have been protests everywhere they would have gone, in the same way that Joe Biden had to avoid college campuses. Literally avoid them. Cancel college tours. Harris, cancel college tours under the Biden-Harris ticket. That would have happened with these guys. That would have been the story. Anybody who wasn't blind could see that. That's a reality. You don't get to sometimes say to people, particularly people, who've lost family members, genocided, who are passionate about this issue. You don't get to say, just don't do it, and then they don't do it. It's absurd. It's an absurd thought. For Harris to have picked Shapiro would have had to have been a conscious effort to sister soldier a portion of the Democratic coalition. And it's not the best thing of the Walz pick. It would have been the best thing of the Bashir pick. Would have been that they don't feel like they can afford or they need to or they're willing to sister soldier a big part of the Democratic base and activist base. The best part of the Walz pick may be that they, on top of that, they went with someone who's going to give a full-throated argument in favor of a whole host of progressive policies. And that's great. And for those of you who don't know what Dave from Jamaica, Shapiro popularity in Pennsylvania may not be as strong on your examination. 49% and less with independents. For those of you who are younger and don't know who Sister Souljah is, Bill Clinton, when he was running for president in 1992, and was trying to he was trying to both have the sort of moniker of being the first black president. That was what they sort of like jokingly referred to him as. But wanted to make it clear that to the extent that he had a good relationship with black people, it wasn't with like the Jesse Jackson. Yeah, the rambunctious ones. And so if I remember correctly, he was doing some show and he either kicked Sister Souljah off or like gave her a dressing down. She was like a rap singer. And it was on stage, I feel like. And basically just, I can't remember what he said to her, like, don't say those things or, pull your pants up. It was some way of indicating, I'm going to create some distance from these people.
Yeah.
And that has been the tactic, frankly, by Democratic politicians and really sort of like people whose tendencies are centrist.
Yeah.
And that is step off the positions, don't appear extreme, reject members of your own coalition so that you seem like you are, not extreme. But embracing black people within the Democratic Party is not an extreme position. Embracing LGBTQ people, not an extreme position. It's just normal behavior. And when you do that, like what Walz is espousing, you say this is normal. You are the weird ones. And that's what's, I think, really effective. It was a speech targeted to Jesse Jackson, who had let her work on his coalition. Yeah.
Yeah, to the Rainbow Coalition.
Yeah.
Basically, because taking uncharitably her comments about the 1992 riots in L.A.
Dizzle McFizzle. Here comes old man Seder telling his stories about our past. LOL. I hope to be this cool when I'm in my 40s. Dizzle, I've got some very bad news for you about my age. All right, folks. You can join us in the fun half by becoming a member. Join themajorityreport.com. Oh, wait, we got some breaking news on merch. Can you bring up this picture? You'll recall Martha, Alito said that she was going to get a flag named called Vergonia. Wait, is it on the front? It's supposed to be on the back. No, that's the back you're showing. Yeah, that's the front and that's the back. She said she's going to get a shirt that says Vergonia, which means shame. Was that what it is? Is it shame?
Shame.
Shame in Italian, yeah.
Here is our limited edition Vergonia shirt. You got to pre-order it. Ordering ends September 6th. So you got 1 month. If you want this shirt, you got to go and get it.
It's like a
as always,
drop.
Union made.
And a big thanks to Tony Y for the winning design of our flag. He's been a huge help in getting this off the ground and getting our design up here. So I'll also link to his website because he's a great graphic designer as well.
So go check that out, shop.majorityreportradio.com. Dave from Jamaica, for young chatters, it's left punching. Yes, exactly. We used to call it hippie
the Bernie
punching.
Bro thing.
Yeah. It's the Bernie Bro thing, but it's also, sort of like, don't embrace abortion too much. We saw that by Clinton in 2004, if you can believe it. Because some people think it's icky. So sort of like you can do halvesies on abortion. Some people say like, oh, it's too extreme if you're talking about, trans people. Join the MajorityReport.com. That's where you can become a sustaining member of this program. You can also support us by just smashing your like button, subscribing to our channel. If you're on Twitch, give us your subscription from, what do you call it? Amazon, your Prime subscription.
Yep.
If you're on TikTok, pass us around, give us a review on iTunes. And for all our Rumble viewers, I want to thank you again for the incredible amount of support that you've given us on Rumble. Are we now number 2 to, right? Have we snuck in front of Crowder on the?
We're right behind Crowder, out of the trails of Crowder with our 20 live viewers, 22 actually, pardon me, and Bongino.
Oh, that's a 10% jump in just an hour.
They put that on my quarterly performance review.
Matt's bucking for a raise. That 20% bump on Rumble.
Yeah, you guys can really help me out there because that's really going to look good. If we get like maybe 40 people on there, I can say I bumped us up by 100%.
Boy, you always got to look at the raw numbers, folks. Those stats sometimes lie. Bradley, what's happening on ESPN?
So since Emma is out until Thursday, we are dark this week, but we are gearing up now because it's getting into the middle of August. So we have NFL training camp to discuss, as well as we'll wrap the Olympics, I think, just do a recap of the 2 weeks of the Summer Olympics and preview what we're hoping to see out of training camp and into the NFL season in the first week of September. So youtube.com/ESPN show will be back either on Thursday or on Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. So go to youtube.com/ESPN show if you want to catch up on any of our prior streams or take a look at some of our clips.
Matt, Left Reckoning.
Left Reckoning tonight, Elias Cepeda on to talk about the Imani Khalif thing in boxing, and also look into Andrew Tate and some other things. Also, we'll be talking about Walz, David and I. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning tonight. Subscribe on YouTube, 7 o'clock Eastern time for Left Reckoning.
Pop up our Just Coffee thing. Okay. Pop this up. You can go to justcoffee.coop. Fair Trade Coffee. We got our new Majority Report logo on the Just Coffee after like 6 years of having this logo. And it's got the 20th anniversary on there. It's 20th anniversary. Galaxy, the runner-up shirt design wasn't going to be on a shirt, but we have a link to it, right? We linked it.
Yes. We'll also put the link to Ann Portland's design for the runner-up shirt as well. I'll put both of those in the YouTube description and show notes.
Son of Mamala says we might be the fastest growing account on Rumble.
Holy crap!
We're growing exponentially. I mean, in terms of rate of increase, 20%. That's crazy.
They probably want to start putting us on the front page pretty soon, I think, next to Crowder and Bongino.
Quick break. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back. back.
Snowflakes has what?
The alpha males are back, 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 back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back, back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare! Nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Dinner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males
Psych.